Hello everybody, Average Gamer here, and welcome to another tutorial video on Supreme Ruler Ultimate. So in this episode, first thing I want to do is kind of a retraction, a little bit of a correction. I actually made a mistake. It was actually brought up to my attention about the resource tab. I kind of screwed up two things. One, I said that, actually let's unlock, there we go. One, I said timber was for other things other than consumer goods. That's actually for, consumption for basically just civilian consumption. That's actually wrong. I said it was also for industrial goods and things like that. I was wrong. Just civilian demand. I have a mod that actually kind of makes it more important. It adds it to whenever you build a building. It also takes X amount of timber, which kind of makes sense, right? Fortunately, it's just civilian consumption. What people just use timber for, I don't know. It could be just, to be honest with you, I have no idea. Yeah, here in Canada we burn wood in furnaces, stoves to keep people warm. When out in like the cottage or something like that. At home we use natural gas. Other than that, I don't know. I mean, civilian consumption could be anything from building to, I don't know. Because I mean, you can build furniture with wood. I mean, you can build a lot of things with wood. It's just a lot of it would be classified as consumer goods or industrial goods, right? So even wood is used in some military goods as well, to be honest with you, at least wood products. I mean, paper, for God's sakes, right? It's used everywhere. So you have to try and figure that one out. The other one was energy. So the way energy power works, or electric power works, as I said, you build it up, you can, do whatever with it. What was brought to my attention that I forgot to mention was that production, right? If I actually go here, click on lock it out, we're going to just fast forward this quick. You're going to notice our stock is going to equal our production in a couple turns. Did I not lock? Did I not? Oh, no auto sales. It should equal out. And wait, it's not. Why is it not equaling out? Am I importing? Oh, I'm importing, that's why. Our stock is, because we're, so theoretically, this would work if we're actually producing enough electric power. Basically what will happen is, if you have a surplus of power, you have to sell it that day or you lose it. It's basically move it or lose it. I'm actually going to bring you into, I think this is my own personal one from a while ago. So it's, yeah, this is an old save that I have. If we go to electric power, you'll notice our production is higher than our actual usage. So if we lock everything out so that I control only how electricity is, watch this. You'll notice in about a day or so that these should equal out. There. So you'll now notice that our production is equal to our stock. What basically will happen is the difference goes into your trades. You have to sell it or it's gone. There's no ability to stockpile electricity right now in the game. Kind of wish there was, like an ability to kind of store it like massive batteries, kind of like, almost like an electrical reserve, you guys say. Take a sip of my drink here. I would love for that to be an option. It would be something that I would always call upon and do, to be honest with you. It'd be fun. It'd be great. I would love to do it. And yeah, it'd be something good. So that's one thing. Those are the two things I wanted to bring up before we continued on. So actually, I'm going to keep this screen up. I'm going to keep this version of the game up. So we're going to look today at the production page. So the production is your defense production. This is your production of your four major things: your army, or your military, your actual armed forces. In Canada, we call them armed forces. It's everybody. But specifically, if you're American or British or Russian, these are your land forces. So your army, land forces. The next one is your air force, or your basically, like I said, Canada. It's all amalgamated into one. So your air force. So this is your aircraft. Your transport aircraft, your supply aircraft, your bombers, your fighters, your interceptors, your attack helicopters, transport helicopters, supply transports, for helicopters, things like that. The next one is your naval force. So this is your landing force, your aircraft carriers, your cruisers, your destroyers, your battleships, your submarines, your attack subs, patrol subs, nuclear subs, patrol craft, you name it. And last but not least, missiles. It's basically everything from missiles that you can put on an aircraft, something as simple as a Hellfire missile. You know, you can put a whole bunch of them on an aircraft, on an attack chopper, all the way up to your strategic intercontinental ballistic missiles, your ICBMs. You can build them all in there. So that's that. Now, here is the icon of what you actually have picked, so you actually can see what it is. Now, what you'll notice is, for example, for our land one here, when I picked it, it has a little attention icon. When you hover over it, it's unused build capacity. So what happens is, every time you build one building, you gain one capacity. So right now we actually have 60 land fabrication units. Basically, we have 60 factories prepared to build 60 different units. Now right now we've got 19 pending construction and 31 in construction. So we're at almost 50%. So you can do that for each and every single one. And there you go. Now when it's completely utilized and maxed at 12, it maxes out. Now what you can do too to save yourself a lot of time is to activate and deactivate using the same usual construction tab as we've seen in the other screens here. So you can actually go here and go land production. I want to turn off most of these because I'm not at war right now. I don't need all these. So turn off a whole bunch of them except for, say, 6. That way you can save up, save up money and kind of sit back and relax. And that way you can save money, which is something I've got to do in my own gameplay right now. I'm just too fucking lazy. A couple other things you need to pay attention to on this screen is this button right here. This is your reserves. This shows you currently how many land units you have in reserve. So if I click here right now for Army, we currently have deployed, so this is deployed and this is reserve. Deployed, 2,338 land units. So that's artillery, tanks, infantry, anti-tank, reconnaissance, transport, and supply vehicles. And over here is our reserves. We currently have 153 units in reserve. Now we'll get into later on deploying and undeploying reserves and all that stuff in the next one. Same for aircraft. It tells you how many you have in reserve and how many you have deployed. Now, with all this, you can actually go into the specific building options, which is here on the right, but you can also hit this and actually select specific general areas. So notice if you hover over, it will show you on the map the general area that you're going to be looking at. So for example, well, we don't really need to see those certain things that just popped up right now, but this just tells you Southeast Asia. You click it and it shows all the different building facilities. So you can actually go to that one specific facility and build something. So right now, for example, this facility right here is building 3 out of 5 things. We click on it, we go pending, and we can build two more units on this facility. You can left click and right click over here, and it will take you to those facilities to actually go through and build. So you can actually go to build facility after facility, or just keep it generalized to everything, and you're laughing. So we'll just change this back to all production. Perfect. So, buttons on the right. First one is, as per usual, it's your cabinet minister. So the military cabinet minister is a little different when it comes to certain things. He doesn't have as many options, but he does have a lot. So for example, arms race, basically it's modernizing your equipment, nuclear weapons programs, and researching the newest warfare technologies. Defense spending, obviously it's spending tons of money on decrease spending. It's to cut spending all over the place for your military. Decrease unit readiness, that basically gets it so that your troops will take longer to get ready for a war. For example, when we got sneak attacked by the Russians, we were lucky we weren't decreasing our readiness, we were actually increasing our readiness. So our troops were just that much more ready to go to war. Next one is defensive military. So this is more garrison units and units that when they get deployed, they're more like defensive oriented where they're deployed. The next one is efficiency. This is basically how good they are. If a soldier has 5 bullets, he uses those 5 bullets and kills 5 people. The least efficient he is, it's 5 bullets to kill 2 people, to kill 1 person, to kill 4 people. Efficiency-wise. Now, it does increase, obviously, as it says right there, concerns. It does increase the cost of your units, but in my eyes, it if you're going to be warlike and doing a lot of wars, pays for itself in spades. Let's see, this readiness. Reserve personnel. This is extremely important for what we're going to talk about in the next episode, but this increases your reserve actual personnel. To build personnel, which we'll get into momentarily, you need a minimum, like you need troops to put in those vehicles. You need people to pull into from your pool of population to actually put them in the vehicle, right? To actually fight in the infantry van vehicle. You need an actual crew to put in that tank. You need also the maintenance crews for that tank. So when you look at what it says to actually hire someone or build a unit, you have to remember that's just not for the tank. That's also for the guy that's, you know, the mechanic on the tank, the guy who works on the electrical system on the tank, the guy who sits there and cleans the tank, all sorts of stuff, right? The next one is, of course, unit readiness. There you go. Maximize active units. Now this is basically having the most amount of units running around your map at any given time, so that guys are constantly active. You don't have that many guys in reserve. The majority of your force is out garrisoned areas. You have units all over the map, which is not a bad thing. The only problem is your petroleum is down. Like, you'll use a lot of petroleum, basically a lot of fuel. A lot of countries may actually classify this as aggressive and might take action appropriate. In the end, though, I mean, it does give your country a more secure situation. Like, our current game as is right now in our Let's Play, almost all our units are in reserve. We're in the process of building up a early warning system, so that way we can save money. Here's military growth. This is basically just to increase your actual military itself. Minimize garrisons, which is actually something that will change in the future. In our Let's Play, we're actually going to increase our garrisons, and we have decreased all our active forces. So all our units are in reserve. Garrisons are all up and ready to go, and at the same time, we're going to be having an early warning system. Radars, early warning aircraft along our borders, so that way if anything ever happens, we can see a buildup occurring, or we can see where the enemies are going to attack from, and we can activate units in accordance to that. Missile units is obviously building and researching missile units. This can be interpreted as aggressive, mainly because if you're building nuclear weapons, well, countries aren't going to look good at that. And offensive military. This is a military based on mobilization, on mobility. This is like pretty much what the Germans did prior to World War II. They looked at everything and said, we want to build an offensive military. A defensive military is very slow moving, but very, very, very good at defending itself. And offensively, it can hit back, but it can't really do that much damage. An offensive military force can hit hard, and it hits hard and fast enough that it doesn't really get shot at that much. It can't defend itself that great if it gets stopped, but it's mobile and can just punch through regions real hard and fast, which is almost what we have right now going on in our Let's Play. We're going to probably roll over to a more defensive military over the next little bit. The catch-22 here is that countries will look at you as building up an offensive military. Basically, if you're building up a military to attack, then your neighbors are going to go, hey, why are you building a military to attack people? Like, what the hell, right? So people are going to obviously worry about that. The next screen, or the next area, which is below here. Oh, and actually these things right here, this is just generic. So you can actually click it and it just says generic decreasing spending. This one just generic defensive military, and this one increased readiness. So down here is some important stuff. So right here it tells you how much you're currently spending on production. So right now for unit production we're spending $98.76 million a day. For preparedness, basically for fighting, we're spending $179.65 million per day. Current salaries are $32.17 million in salaries. We're basically spending $32 million in paying people, and then for training we're spending $127 million just on training people and all that stuff. Now you notice there's the plus minus. You can increase it or decrease it. You can also click on it, and it becomes a slide scale, which is pretty good. Now down here it does a couple of things. First two is locks. So for example, first one is lock minister from military spending, and the second one is lock minister from garrison control. So you'll notice that when we pick a location here, and we click the land tab, which we went into earlier, You can see down here, which I never went into before, which is why I'm doing it now, is the garrisons. This shows you, right now we have 3 garrison units that are able to garrison that location. If we click on a town, like this one here, you'll notice that it has way more capacity because it's a city, right? It's a town. The larger the city, obviously, the larger the capacity. So here's another small little town. It's actually a village. It can only hold 3. This one here, I believe, is a town. No, it's a village as well. It can only carry 3. This is a city, so we can carry, I think it's 10. No, 8. Can we find an actual town, though? That's another village. That's an industrial zone. That's a military base. Military base maxes out automatically at 7. That's a city. Really, I can't find a town anywhere. Oh well. Is this a town? No, it's another village. God damn it. Yeah, these are all cities out here, aren't they? Village, 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 village. Small town. So small town has 5, so there you go. And that's another village. So depending on the size of the actual city and town and things like that, you can garrison different amounts of units. Now to control that, you can actually tell, as I said, the minister, to increase. Basically, he'll if you lock him out of it, you then have to control how many garrison units you have there, which we'll get into when we get into the actual defense tab itself. But here's where you can lock the minister from doing anything associated with garrison units. The next one is military spending. So that's basically producing troops or producing units, and also spending for these expenditures here. So if you have this unlocked, he can change the cost of stuff here, or also change production over here. And then here is the initiative. Now the initiative is the ability for basically the military to act on its own. The higher the initiative, the higher it will completely act on its own as per what you've told it to. So earlier when we went into the different, different theaters and battles, battle zones, you can tell it to do certain things, like battle zone control, it will pay attention to this. So if you tell it, hey, I want you to be mostly defensive, and I want this to be high priority, it will see that and go, okay, so we're going to move some troops here. We're going to move some defensive units into... really? Can I at least pick one that I can pronounce the name to? Can I pick one that I know that I can... let's go to our capital, Peking. Oh, sorry, Beijing. So, we can know in Beijing here, we want equal force. It's low. It's not the highest priority. It's got a priority, but nonetheless, put troops there. So with the initiative, it will see what you're doing on this screen here when you pick a battle control, and will make the appropriate decision associated with what you've done. Now that also can be superseded by the theater overlay as well. So the theater overlay, best thing to do actually is to turn the theater overlay off and do it this way. So for example, Southeast Asia, we can tell the troops in Southeast Asia we want to be defensive, but we also want to be a high priority. We can also tell them in Central Asia over here, well, we're currently in war in this area and we're actually currently fighting, so I want this to be a high priority and want to be offensive. So that the AI will be appropriate. Which is in my eyes, this is pretty good. I kind of wish they had this on the screen, to be honest with you. Fortunately, they don't really have it here. I mean, they've got that little option there, and that's it. Kind of wish they did, but yeah, can't have everything, right? So that's all these. So the initiative is basically what you tell the AI, hey, I want you to be offensive in Central Asia, with a high priority. So the next option here we have is the actual building units. So first you'll see it says land design. So you have your land designs, your ground troops, your infantry, your recon, your tanks, and all that stuff. So you can see infantry, recon, tanks, anti-tank, artillery, air defense, and transport. Now transport is things like pontoon vehicles, bridging equipment, as you can see here, supply vehicles, things like that. There's nothing that actually transports units, which in my eyes is kind of stupid, because it's called a transport, but it actually doesn't transport units. they just, that's it. Like they don't really do anything. It's kind of weird. Like this says right here, its overall weight is 92. It's combat time and all that stuff. It's day to build and all that stuff. But in the end, it doesn't carry anything. It's got a range. To be 100% honest, I don't build these that much. I do at the beginning of the game, so I can get my resources out there. But other than that, these are pretty useless, to be honest with you. Later on in the game, you'll get things like actual transport aircraft that actually can work to transport units from the east, say the eastern coast of China. Say we're at war with Russia and we push all the way across here. We end up with kind of like almost like a stalemate along the rivers here. I can load up most of the troops here into aircraft, fly them over and dump them there, and then fly back, which would be which is pretty good. That's aircraft. Next one is air defense. So this is where you build your surface air missiles, your AA guns, your flak, you name it, to basically shoot down enemy aircraft. Simple as that. One thing you can do is build up a good air defense network, which is actually one of my plans in my Let's Play. It's going to be to build up an early warning network and a surface and basically a missile network of surface to air missiles and air and land to land missiles. So basically, we'll end up like almost like a line of defense, where if at any moment's notice, we can lob missiles into Eastern Europe. Obviously conventional weapons, so non-conventional meaning nuclear warheads. So they'll all be conventional, explosives. Nothing nuclear. The next one's artillery. So that's like your mortars, obviously motorized mortars, artillery pieces like your howitzer here. MLRSs are multi-rocket launch systems. Basically, just fires a whole bunch of rockets. Let's see here. MLRS, artillery, Scuds. So this is where I'm talking about. You can build like a basically defense network for missiles. Throw a couple Scuds in Western Russia, for example, so we invaded them, and we're going to defend ourselves against Eastern Europe. Place a whole bunch of these in Western Europe, like 30 or 40 of them. Arm them to the teeth with missiles, and you just sit back and tell it to engage whenever it's going to engage, and there you go. You're laughing, right? And they can actually slow down an enemy advance pretty quickly, enough for obviously the main force to come in and actually to engage. Next one is your anti-tank. So these are the units that you use to kill tanks. So you have your actual anti-tank guns. So here, a 106mm anti-tank gun. Here we have a 190mm gun. Take out tanks. Later on, you'll get additional units that actually have anti-tank missiles. Like here we have the anti-tank 3 Sagar missile. This was built in the 60s by the Russians, I believe. And to be honest with you, it's historically was a very, very good infantry anti-tank weapon. It was used in Afghanistan, I think, and it was sold around the world to be used. It's really good. Next one, obviously, is your tanks. So you have your MBTs, like the ZTZ-59 here. Then you have your light tanks, such as the ZTS-62. And then you have your TL3 Regal, which is kind of like a medium tank. Usually what I'll do is I'll look at its weight. So for example, this tank here is 2 tons. I'll kind of knock all that off. I'll just say it's 2 tons. But then we can look at the ZTZ-59 here. That's 1 ton. And then the light tank is almost a ton. So you can kind of work out where things sit and all that stuff. Also the age of a tank as well, which we'll get into. Next one's the recon. So that's like your actual recon units. So these are usually the units that you'll, when you do a push through the enemy unit or you find like a hole in the defense. So for example, right now, here, we have a hole in them. So theoretically what you can do, if you're playing cautiously or controlling everything like I was just doing massive invasions and assaults now because we're just 2 huge countries just slugging it out. But if you're at war with a smaller country, what you can use and utilize is recon vehicles. You can actually send them out ahead of yourselves, or I guess you're ahead of your units, to kind of look around to see where guys are. Later on, recon units are pretty much going to be replaced by UAVs. early warning aircraft such as AWACS and things like that. So, and even satellites, to be honest with you. You'll be able to see where the other guys are, and they won't be able to see you, and you pretty much just sit back and lob missiles and stuff like that from basically over the horizon. Next one is probably the biggest one, which is infantry. So this is your regular infantry, like for example our SEALs here, or our elite forces, our airborne elite, our elite guard itself, our Marines, our infantry, to mounted infantry and infantry fighting vehicles, such as a light infantry vehicle here, or the Infantry Offensive Force Vehicle 2. I actually googled this one. It was like a prototype vehicle made by somebody, and I can't remember where. I think it was in the States. But, you know, it even tells you here, right? You have amphibious units, you've got, it's a hard target. It's not a light target because it's an actual armored fighting vehicle and things like that. Next one is your aircraft. So you have your helicopters, which can transport aircraft, which can transport troops. They can also scout. They can also be early warning vehicles as well. They can actually do quite a number of things, anti-submarine warfare, things like that. I usually use them as attack aircraft, as initial attack units. So, for example, when fighting, say, with like these units here, I would have the actual attack choppers with them to take out hard targets. So, for example, I wouldn't be too worried about this light tank, but this Su-85 and this Su-85, I would engage them with the attack helicopters and wipe them out. Next one is your interceptor. So this is your aircraft that's made and designed to intercept other aircraft. Basically, you're going to use it for the first part of the game, not so much the latter part, to basically protect your own borders against incursions. Next one is the tactical bomber. So this is an aircraft that's designed to go hit one specific target and back out. So for example, I wanted to fly in and hit this Jeep, or one of these two artillery locations here. I want them to move in and hit these artillery. That's tactical. It's in and out. Next one's your multi-role. We have none right now. But multi-role aircraft is your later, better aircraft. It's like your F-15 your F-15 Strike Eagle, your F-14, or sorry, your F-18. Your F-14 is actually Interceptor. F-18, not the MiG-29, but I think the Su-37. It's kind of one of these things where, like, for example, the F-22 Raptor technically is a multi-rolled aircraft because it also has ground attack in its design. But when you actually look at it, building a stealth aircraft with a significant amount of offensive weapons, with usually 2 to 4 MRAMs, then a couple M109s, or M109s, AM9 Sidewinders. It's built mostly for air-to-air. But the Joint Strike Fighter, for example, is multi-role. So that's pretty good. Strategic bombers, that's obviously like the historical B-52 Stratofortress. So a lot of indirect bombing you can do with it. You can hit targets. You can also hit ground units. Ground units can get just destroyed by this thing because basically they're just carpet bombing. I will admit, strategic bombing in this game doesn't work as good as it did in previous games. You can use strategic bombers to wipe out large territories and large areas, but it just takes a long time. Next one is patrol aircraft, or AWACS, early warning aircraft systems. Basically, these guys are going to patrol your area, and using radar from the air hitting the ground, they'll see all the ground units. They'll also be using that radar to look for other aircraft, which is pretty good. They'll be using electronic countermeasures to jam other aircraft, for example. They'll also be using reconnaissance, so they'll be a little faster than most aircraft because they've been stripped of everything other than basically cameras and an engine, and they can fly in. You'll see a whole bunch, and then they'll fly back. The best examples of this are obviously the American AWAC, which is basically a huge Boeing, I want to say a 777, but I might be wrong there. Basically, it's a large Boeing passenger jetliner stripped down with a huge radar dish on top. And, you know, it can see just tons, right? We have them flying up and down North Americans, like all up and down North America. Like the Americans fly them literally up and down, like around here, constantly. Yeah, it's one of those things in North America. We're an island on our own. It's Fortress North America, as they call it, or called it, I should say. But there's the iconic, AWACS. There's the J-Stars, which are the more modernized version of it, which is basically the exact same aircraft, just it's low slung. Kind of looks like it's got a double chin on it. Then you also have obviously the spy aircraft, so the U-2, the SR-71, the Aurora. I don't know if the Aurora is in here, but you do get spy aircraft. You can overfly and it'll show a large area because of its cameras and things like that. So there's patrol aircraft. And then you got their transports. So that's your helicopter transports, your aircraft. So these can transport troops and equipment, aka supplies, which is pretty good for long term. Like for example, in a couple of with our war with Russia, if we bring up our supplies here, supplies run a little short near the border. So I was running aircraft up to the border and dropping supplies off. Same with our units up here and around here. We're just constantly dropping supplies off to them to supply the troops. Next one is your Navy. So you have your submarines, which is basically in my eyes, it's mostly the offensive. It's your offensive units. There is no defensive submarine. Submarines made to go out there and fucking kill someone, or go out there and basically intimidate someone. They're not defensive in any formal way, unless you want to think of it as, I have a nuclear sub out there. It's got 36 nuclear weapons on it. It could be off your border, or off your coast. It may not be off the coast, but you're not going to know about it, or you don't know where it is. So I mean, it could be the bad, but my eyes, very offensive. Carriers, same thing. I see them as more defensive, or sorry, offensive, depending on your country. Like now, playing as China, for example, we don't have any islands really. We have this island up here, this one here, and then this one here. Maybe a couple of tiny ones, but nothing too crazy, right? So we really don't need a navy that needs to project our power, right? Now, if you're the U.S., you want that power projection. That's what aircraft carrier is there for. It's there to build so you can actually deploy it long term and basically scare people. In our Let's Play right now, we're building a couple of aircraft carriers. I think we're building 2, and we're building the aircraft for it. Because our plan is to project our power into the Baltic over here and into the Pacific. We need a couple of aircraft carriers to do that. Capital ships are basically used to protect, in my eyes, the carrier. It's used to basically kind of give it a little bit of a shell of protection. Same with the escort ships. They're there to escort the aircraft carrier. They're there to be part of its battle group. That's pretty much it. Yeah. And next one's patrol ships. Patrol ships, in my eyes, are, for example, we have, I think it's our Beach class, which we're using like crazy. Oh, actually, no, sorry, that's an escort. So another thing about the escorts, they're basically the destroyers. One of the things they can also do is hunt they call them hunter-killer, where they can hunt down and kill submarines and other warships with their missiles and their with everything else. It's very good to have them running in packs of 2 or 3, because they can run down and hunt down and kill just about anything, as long as they can overpower it. If not, then that's what the battle group is for, and the battle group can actually go out and hunt and kill. I like to control the battle groups myself. Fortunately, you can't set up waypoints or anything like that. You can only kind of set up patrol points. So I keep most of my Navy, to be honest with you, at home in port. The next one is your patrol ships. So these are the ships that usually just patrol your own waters, and basically stop people from coming into them and breaking your territorial waters. And last but not least, transports. So transports do a couple things. One, they transport your troops to obviously non-EU locations. For example, you can do a naval invasion. With these guys, you basically load them all up, send the ships over, and then drop them. You don't have to do that. Ships will naturally hop into publicly owned or basically generic merchant ships and invade, which is what we did for our invasion of Taiwan, and also our invasion of the island here, and took down Kardla. But what you can do is specialized troops. So, for example, you can use the elephant landing craft to put troops on there. It'll then move those troops to that location, and if they're amphibious troops specifically, it'll drop them there, and it will also supply them. So, to be honest with you, these are really good to use if you're going to be doing amphibious assaults. So this tells you right here, it's a surface target. So if the other guys have missiles that specifically target surface targets, ships, it will target them. It says right here, it can unload away from a dock. It doesn't have to be at a dock, unlike the merchant system. That has to be at a dock only if the units are not amphibious. I build a lot of amphibious units, so I really don't need to spend a lot of money on these. Long term, though, it would be a good idea, or short term, to get these guys. That way, you have that ability to kind of sit back and go, okay, well, each unit is only one merchant ship, so if we get engaged, no big deal. I'll lose 2 or 3 of them, but the majority of them will get through. The thing here is that these guys can take a lot of troops a lot further. And, I mean, they can take 2,100 tons. So, yeah, it's pretty good when you think about the weight of certain things. So, they're also there to support or to send, supplies and things like that. Next one are your missiles. So you have multiple different types of missiles. The first one is silo launched. So these are missiles that are launched from, well, ICBM silos. These are ICBMs. No ifs, ands, or about it. These are designed to blow up cities. It's a nuclear bomb. Nuclear missiles. Next one is sub-launch. So these are missiles that are launched from submarines. They can target, as you can see in the little picture here, other ships, other missiles. They can also target land targets, so tanks, infantry, anti-aircraft facilities, you name it, aircraft, other ships, other subs, or buildings, which is pretty good. Naval launch, same thing. These are designed to hit, for example, the Geyser here. It's nuclear, it's supersonic, it can be launched from both a ship and a boat, hence the pictures down at the bottom. But if you look, if I can double click here so it doesn't build it, perfect. So this tells you what it can be put on. So it's nuclear, it's a cruise missile, it can be launched navally, and it can be sub-launched. Here it's used for close air, it's for indirect bombardment, it's a strategic nuclear weapon, and it's air mission type. Basically, this just means it's air. You'll see it flying across the ground. Now, here to tell you, its max size technically is 6. It moves at a maximum amount of 600 kilometers. So the radius is 600 kilometers, which is basically the distance from like Korea to Japan here. Its movement speed is 780 kilometers an hour. Its profile is 80. Just ignore that. That's not to worry. But here we go. So fortified attack. It can do 4,410 units of damage to a fortification, a town, a building, something along those lines. Something you can build pretty much in the resource page, or you build yourself by right-clicking. It can destroy it. Soft attacks lets your infantry fighting, or your people basically, like your troops. Mostly it'll actually say a soft target, so a soft target usually is your infantry itself, not the infantry fighting vehicles or tanks, but just the infantry, or even certain support vehicles like transport vehicles and things like that. Soft attack. And landed aircraft, mind you. Next one is hard attack, so that's your tanks, your infantry fighting vehicles, and things like that. So here it tells you it'll do 905 units of damage. And here it'll say surface attack. Surface attack is ships that are on the surface. It will do 905 damage to that. Itself, when it comes to defense, it can defend itself to 125 points of damage to ground defense. And it can defend itself to 125 units of damage to aircraft. Basically, it has 125 units of health, basically. So aircraft can try to shoot it down, and ground units with with surface-to-air missiles and AA guns, flak, you name it, can try to shoot this thing down. So even if you fire a nuclear missile, doesn't mean you fire a missile and it goes and hits the target. It can still get taken out on its way. Then you have air launch. So this is aircraft launch missile. So here we have an anti-surface missile, the Karen missile, which is the one I use the most of the time. It says right here, it's air-launched, it's air mission type, it's a guided missile, it's to hit close air targets. So here it'll even say, it does 0 fortification attack, but it can hit ground troops, it can hit armored vehicles, can hit ships, it has a movement range of 40 kilometers from the point of being fired, and it goes 1,102 kilometers an hour. The max you can have at any given time of these is 2, which is pretty good. And then last but not least, your land and launch. This is your infamous, well, here you go, your Scud missile. It does saturation, it does ballistic, and it's land launched. To be honest with you, those are the ones that you're going to use if you want to wipe out cities and things like that. It's kind of hard to explain, but basically aircraft can't destroy a building. If you have enough aircraft, right, they can wipe out a city. But it's economically useless. But you can put, 2 or 3 missiles into it, and with massive warheads, there you go. So that is that section. Now here we have the fabrication options. Now for fabrication options, and I'm going to warn you, as I said, this is a long video. You have your auto build features. So for auto build, you have the ability to, well, turn it on or off. Tell it if you want offensive, defensive, or balance between offense, defensive missiles, or ground forces. And here you can actually say, do you want to go for quality or quantity? You can do that for all of them, which I like. But once you also pick, for example, missiles, you turn them on, it gives you the option. Do you want to do air-launched, naval, sub, non-sub? It doesn't do that for any of the other ones, mainly because you can't really do that, right? But for missiles specifically, it gives you that option. Do you want to build nuclear weapons, saturation missiles, missiles that are specifically designed to attack buildings, attack ships, or for ground attack, which I like. It's really good. Next option is your condition. So this is your infamous DEFCON in my eyes. So this right now tells us our effective bonus for basically being active is 7%. Our build speed bonus is 5% because we are condition high. At this current moment, we are at war. So it knows, okay, we need to start building troops a little bit faster, and it builds up over time. Efficiency, so right now we're at a 7% efficiency bonus. Here it gives you a couple options for pathing. So for example, right now we have told our ground units, if someone comes into our territory, attack them. We don't care who they are, attack them. If they're in our border, attack them. Here we're telling air units to path over neutral regions. So if we turn that on, for example, if I told an aircraft to fly from, say, from Vietnam to the military front, it'll fly through. So say the aircraft is down here in Vietnam, and I tell it with this little line here, hey, I want you to fly all the way to this airbase up here. You'll notice that it goes through Pakistan right here, it goes through India over here, and it goes through Bangladesh. What will happen is, as you incur and break into those other, or not break in, but you actually incur or invade those other countries' territories, they have the ability to shoot down your aircraft and also declare war on you. You're basically violating their airspace. So that is something you have to watch out for. And then same for the Navy as well, your merchant marines. When you sell troops and things like that, they can do the same thing. Here is the ability to turn on and off nuclear weapons. So if this is turned on, and you go into that this button here and want to fire off nuclear warheads, you can do it as long as you turn it on that screen. Next one is your battle zone control, which I showed earlier on the map. You can pick an area on the map, any area on the map, hit the button there, and boom, you have the battle zone, which you can set, as I said earlier, the priority for the AI to put a lot of troops there. You can tell the AI what you want, whether you want a balanced force, an offensive force, or a defensive force. You can also tell it to do, repair. So for example, I want you to enable auto repair, or I want to disable auto repair. So basically, as you invade and take territories, you basically can tell it what to do for buildings and stuff. You can also tell it to maximize garrisons in the area, or basically clear out the garrisons, and that way that'll give you basically the ability to move troops to a different location altogether. Down here's the theater controls, which in my eyes, I prefer these controls, mainly because, as I said earlier, they control a massively more larger area. As you see, battle zones, way too specific, but theater overlays, more broader, I like them, it's a lot better. So it's the same thing, except there's a little difference here. There's just 2 extra options. First one is espionage. Here you actually can tell the computer, hey, in the Central Asia theater of war, I want you to prioritize our espionage. I would also like you to be aggressive diplomatically. So you can actually tell it, hey, be more diplomatic in this area, but talk to people a lot more. Be more aggressive in the area versus the spies themselves, which basically is telling people, hey, steel basically. And you have Eastern North America, Western North America. Then last but not least, you have obviously the building facility controls, which is you have with all the other stuff. Here you can build anything that you can build to build ground units, or even position ground units. So for example, an airbase, you can basically place aircraft on an airbase, or you can also put them in reserve at an airbase. Aircraft protection is where you build your aircraft and your helicopters. Barracks is where you store your land troops. Land production is where you build your military boots, your military forces. So that's your tanks, your infantry, and all that stuff. Military complex is basically the center of the military base. It's a prerequisite or requirement. It's basically like the headquarters of that location or that spot. We'll zoom into an area over here. You'll see here that there's a military facility in the middle of all these things. Think of it as the administrative center for that little area of territory. Kind of like how an industrial complex is the centralized location of whatever's going on in that hex. Basically, it's the administrative center of the resource collection here. It's the administrative center of our fabrication centers. Over here, fabrication centers as well. After military complex, we have missile productions. That's where obviously we build our missiles. Here we also have missile silos. This is where we actually store our ICBMs. Yeah. Naval production, this is where we actually build our naval ships. Our ships, our submarines, our aircraft carriers, our destroyers, our cruisers, our transport aircraft, our invasion craft. And then seaports. This is where you store your naval warships. And I'm saying naval warships, but I'm also, I keep pronouncing it wrong, but basically your warships and your transport and supply ships can all go into reserve at a seaport. And that is the long video about the defense production tab. In the next episode, we're going to get into the defense tab itself, which very more complex. So another long video. In that case, I will see you guys next time. See you on the battlefield. Bye-bye.